Okay, everyone. This is Ringadad, not financial advice, just the way I'm looking at the market. Um, yeah, looks like picked the low pretty well the other day. Funnily enough, I made a comment in Discord. It was the other day, 28th. We were talking about be careful of news after the close on Friday in the US. Someone said, you know what? What did he say? Are you expecting any specific news? And I said, no, I'm actually expecting good news. And lo and behold, Trump comes out and talks about a US crypto reserve with XRP, Sol Later, and BTC. Interestingly, there was no mention of ETH there. Why would you do ADA too? Holy shit. It's ridiculous. That reeks of actually him and his mates bought into those coins. Anyway, so we got the good news. That pisses me off because I was fucking asleep and I was running a head short just because we left a fair bit of liquidity behind on this little pump, and I was expecting it to come back down into this region here and just sort of retest that level. But instead, it moves so much. Like I thought I had heaps of protection on that, and it fucking liquidated it. Anyway, that's why I play around with a smaller account and only do spot in my my super account. So where to from here? I mean, momentum wise, this is a pretty good spot to keep moving from. We did in the total versus stable coins. So this was the key level. Bounced off at once, couldn't hold below it. Got pretty close to this trend line here too, which was a pretty good sign. And now obviously we've confirmed above that. We've broken straight through this level. I'd kind of expect this because we've essentially tapped into this level too, which was a pretty strong level on the 1 hour all the way through. And it's obviously got these wicks, the bottom of these candles. This sort of region is a pretty strong region. Even we are getting actually close to this one here, which, you know, we could bounce around up here for a little bit, but there's a couple of reasons why I do actually expect this to retrace from that level. But just given the strength of that move over the next couple of weeks, I'm actually expecting it to come up into this region here. And look, 150K is back on the cards with that sort of news. If it's all confirmed and there's no bad news that comes out around it, like, oh, we're going to be buying it over a longer period, or we're going to be buying less of it, because he didn't actually mention how much they were going to be buying. He was just talking about crypto reserve. So I pretty much expect it to come back up into there. Probably up somewhere around this level. So in the next week, be very interesting. But March the 10th, remember March the 10th? I've almost written it off last week, but March the 10th could still be pretty close to the top on BTC if we continue this run. And it's going to be volatile. There'll be a lot of swings in both directions. I'd say it's just going to be a liquidity eating fest for the exchanges. So yeah, we're at a pretty key level now. We have pulled back off it so far. Yeah, just got to be mindful of these levels and potentially buying dips at key levels. So if we break through the here, possibly some resistance, well, should be some resistance at this first red line. That was a pretty major level previously. That one didn't provide much support, and so I'm going to get rid of that. This next green one, somewhere in that region, should be a bit of resistance as well. So this is kind of the idea. If it does continue to go bullish, potentially back into here. Honestly, that's actually less likely, I think, just because there wasn't that many people that got in on that pump. So yeah, up into there, so pull back down, maybe into here, and then a run up into that region, pull back into here, and then a run up, and somewhere in this region is probably going to be the top on Bitcoin. If we're breaking above them, then 200k plus is doable. But I suspect we'll be hitting about 150 somewhere here, and should be reasonable timing for the rest of the market to actually pull back again as well. So it'll depend a lot on what the general stock market is doing at that stage. But yeah, I'd be very worried around that sort of area. So what does that look like on Bitcoin itself? Basically, I mean, interesting that took off there from the 200 EMA and the middle of that channel. I was kind of expecting a bit more of a recovery of this vector here, but it'll hit there eventually. We have pretty well recovered the daily vectors all the way down in this one candle already. What's that bottom top? 11%. That's a pretty big day for Bitcoin, especially these days. Even this pump over here was basically the same. So I'd be a little bit cautious about this in terms of buying the top. I'd prefer to see it back into at least into the top of this channel, potentially even somewhere around these moving averages. So 88 seems like a better buy level if you're buying spot, but it like Bitcoin can rip if it really wants to go. The fact that we on the 15-minute we actually jumped outside the linear regression channel. This is 3.5 standard deviations here. It's a fairly quick, fairly major move. Bitcoin, it's a bit of a coin flip. Quite often with Bitcoin doing this as to whether it just continues ahead or whether it does actually get a bigger pullback. And now I'm leaning more towards pullback at this stage just because of the speed of it. But it liquidated so many shorters in that move too, including myself, obviously. But that we are coming up into the point of control as well. We have rejected off the value area low. So some key resistance levels we just smashed straight into. Closure below that level wouldn't be great. Actually almost expect a little bit more sideways if we close below this trend line here, because that goes back all the way into here. Actually not drawn very well. Oh, no, that was okay. It's not going to be a super strong trend line. I'm more worried about the value area low, I think. Closure above that, and it should be good to keep going. But yeah, moves back into the top of this channel. It was a very strong trend line. Closure above it would be quite bullish. But don't be surprised if we come back down and retest that level tomorrow around 91. Closures above the value area high of 98.7. That's going to be very bullish. And then you're talking up around this level pretty quick. But yeah, I don't know that 150 is possible, but off the back of that sort of news, it's hard to say either way. 120 is certainly possible. That could happen around 20th of March, 19th of March, maybe sooner. Just got to beware. This trend line here is a pretty big one from a long way back. Basically, just joins the first peak of this with the first peak of the previous cycle. This other trend line here, why that looks like that, but it should be like that. So, look, I do actually kind of expect this to blow off. And it depends what the rest of the market's going to do. So let's go and have a look at that because there is some clues in there. Okay. Not super convinced by the move on like the green day on Friday. It could be a turnaround point. There was a lot of people shorting, but at this stage, I'd actually like the horizontal level's not a bad one that it hit and has bounced off. So on that basis, most of these indexes did hit a key horizontal level and closed back above on Friday. So the S&P 500 just hitting this trend line here is a little bit of a 50-50, but again, good horizontal level. And momentum is shifting to the upside. If it can maintain that, BBWP is quite high. We could see a move, excuse me, very easily up into this trend line at least. Do I think we're done to the downside? Not really, but you know, the SPY closed above its trend line that we had. Still expect this at some stage in March probably to get back down into here. Now, start of March can be a bit of a buy period. Typically, March is very choppy. So just be aware of that. Equal weight found support off that level as well. So it's looking like stocks could have some upside. IWM retesting that breakdown level though. If IWM can get back above that, and even better get back above this channel, the bottom of that channel, then no worries, we'll go on a bit more of a run. There are some vector candles to pick up if it wants it, particularly this one. But I'd actually expect IWM to find some resistance probably up around the middle of this channel over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and probably get rejected from that. But this year is going to be a very choppy year. XLI is back above that channel. XLY, XLP, just retesting a 200 EMA at the moment. Kind of in support of a move up. Kind of. This rejecting that resistance line on XLP versus SPY, that's actually a good sign. Like you would expect some at least some sort of bounce from that level. If we had a rip, if we had a rip straight through that, that would have looked very, very negative for markets. So what I don't think is going to happen is that we'll actually get much below that sort of level. I think this here is going to be a key level. Somewhere in that zone, we should actually bounce. And I suspect the next time we do that, we're probably going to break this trend line here, which is not going to be great for market. That will be a sign that we've topped. So I'm expecting not necessarily a lower high on S&P 500 and NASDAQ, but kind of expecting it on their equal weights. So equal weight NASDAQ, we've had this in here for a little while now. I do expect it to come back up into that vector candle. But again, I don't really expect a new all-time high there. A new all-time high on the NAS itself is certainly possible. Would not surprise me at all. But again, you got a vector candle recovery in there as well. So the one thing I'm not seeing is a huge dark pool transaction on S&P 500 at the moment. Like not massive. Sorry, I'll just come down here to the skew. So the skew obviously had a bounce on Friday. That was a good thing. It's hard to go against more upside at the moment. I think that is certainly possible. And the one-day volatility inverted, it's bounced as well. So again, that's in support of another move to the upside as well. So we're going to be watching them pretty closely. The VIX kind of hit a reasonable level. It's not a fantastic level for a buy the dip, but it did hit the 20 level, so that's okay. Permission to buy the dip, but not hold it for very long. DJT gold, for the time being, it's broken that trend line. DJI gold, that's a pretty strong move back up as well. But again, breaking these levels, they might rip up, but I expect them to come back down pretty hard and probably not. I'd be surprised if like DJT even breaks this previous high here. So I think I'm just going to put a line on that too. It'll be a key area to watch for markets. Semis hit that level and has bounced. So that is now putting in a key support level for us. Got a bit to go, but I do expect it to come up into here. Potentially even just above that red line there. Home builders, good little basing pattern here. It'll probably continue the upside, but again, I'm not expecting a new high on this. It's just been punished for so long that it's due for a bit of a bounce. Breaks of this trend line could lead to bigger things, so you do have to keep that in mind, that markets are generally bullish. But this is sort of showing us that the economy isn't particularly healthy. Regional banks had a decent bounce, not huge, but decent. What is it? XLF. So financials actually is really strong at the moment. The financials ETF. That was one thing that was suggesting that it's not necessarily the end of things yet. It is at a resistance level though. Like if we see this pull back from here and break some of these lows, then that's probably a bad sign. It'll probably happen around the time we're getting up into resistance levels, let's say, on the rest of the market. So same equal weight XLY versus, XLP versus SPY. Didn't really hit this level yet, and it doesn't have to. Pulling back into this sort of vector candle in here. I think that's entirely possible. If we bounce again from that, obviously this is the key one. Like this trend line here breaks above that, and it's probably there's something cracked in the market, I would say. 50 EMA here for the equal weight XLY versus XLP. Again, bounces on this up into these levels. If we break new all-time highs on the equal weight XLY XLP, then no bear market yet. Obviously. German market, not a bad little bounce, but that's still negative bias for me. Was a vector candle that's a lot of green. For it to not actually pump, it's not really at a low like this where you see a lot of buying coming through to actually then accelerate the market to the upside. It's yeah, not a great read on that. Hang Seng's still sort of, you could probably call this a coil at the moment. Till we break below this level, not interested in suggesting this will come down. Yeah, really needs to break that. Key target is probably going to be, yeah, that 22K still. UK market, that is one of the stronger looking markets, but as I said the other day, it's straight into this little trend line, break above that, and it could go quite well. And momentum is the upside, to be fair. BBWP is accelerating to the upside. It's like, yeah, it is likely that it would at least come up to 9,000, just based on that alone. Japanese market got a lot of buying the dip there. So again, it's kind of set up for another little pump. See, a lot of the market was negative, so that's why I called that we were probably going to bottom on Bitcoin where we did. It's just so many people were negative, but you've got to watch the rips here because TLT is still getting bought up. So there's still moves into defensives. XLV is still getting moved to the upside. That's typically a defensive stock. Although there was a decent dark pool trade on that, which I'll get to. High yield junk, this was the one as well. It was high yield junk generally going up when things are going down. Just doesn't look great. This is the one that needs to reverse for me. We need to clear LQD versus IEF above this trend line to really go on a decent bullish run. If we start to reject off that on a jump to the upside, then it won't be looking good. If this keeps coming to the downside, then I would suggest that the little bounce that we've had is just a dead cat bounce and like a little one, vector candle recovery basically, and then we'll continue to downside. Interestingly, the 3-month 10 years looks like it's about to invert again. US 2-year and 10-year probably got a little bit further to come as well, so that will allow markets to go up. Chinese 2-year and 10-year are still, 10 years rolled over a little bit, 2 years still going. Copper seems to be basing here around that 0.5 fib. If it does bounce, that again is in support of overall markets to move up for a little bit. Looks like gold's got a bit of support off the mid-band. Still not super interested in it until it gets down into here. So I may have had a little nibble on Friday on that. Can't remember. Probably not a bad DCA level anyway on gold. Silver got a little bit of a buy off the 50 EMA. Yeah, not a bad level for silver, but at this stage I still think gold and silver will come back a little bit more. Oil's struggling against support and control, so it needs to clear that if it's going to keep going up. Dixie. So I think the next level for Dixie for me is actually 108. I'd expect a pullback from that, but decent vector candle sort of and wick up in there around the 109, 109 and a half. So Dixie's not done for yet. Could be forming a head and shoulders here too, so have a look out for that. But yeah, at the moment, Aussie dollars hit a decent level and had a bit of a buy up there, so still expect that to come back a little bit more, but we'll see. Especially if the Dixie keeps going to the upside. Japanese yen's pull back a bit. It's probably got a fair bit to come too, actually. Euro, I don't really see it turning around from where it's at. I still think it'll come back a little bit further, potentially into that 102. Global liquidity has dropped off a little bit, so again, that's not a great sign. The markets are not necessarily moving in sync with that at the moment. Percentage of stocks above 15 moving average had a little jump as well. Yeah, we are pretty low on this read, so we could get a decent run to the upside, but at the same time, it's kind of buying here with overall macros the way they are. Don't hold your positions for a long time. Be my thinking. So close to hitting the 200 EMA, which I think it's probably a touch on the 200 SMA. Oh, SMA slower. There you go. But good bounce off that previous trend line there for Mag 7. So hit the target, couldn't break through, tried twice. Yeah, having these run up back into this trend line would make a lot of sense. So still leaning towards a week or so of up, mostly up. Tesla, this would piss off a lot of bears that were waiting to take profit in the gap fill, but I actually suspect that it's probably probably going to have a bit of a bounce, probably into this 50 EMA here. That would be a pretty good resistance level, I would think. Somewhere around 330. Nvidia, still think it's pretty likely to hit this trend line here. Maybe up into here if it just grinds up, but I don't know that there's going to be much grinding going on in this market at the moment. I think they'll try and move it quicker just to get shorters out of the system. This too there was pretty massive put wall around these sort of levels, so the options are the key at the moment. Microsoft, yeah, retested that 200 EMA probably on Google. Sorry, Microsoft is in a decent buy zone. It did recover this vector candle. Pretty good buy zone. I expect some resistance pretty soon, but if everything's running, then Microsoft could go on a decent run as well. There's a massive gap on Microsoft up to 155-ish. Sorry, 440. I don't know what that scale is. Anyway, RK again closed back above the mid band of this channel. Apple, wow, that's a big candle. Bottom to top 5%. It's not bad. Yeah. I mean, obviously, you've got to be looking at this trend line here being the next stop. Just got to be careful of these sell the rips coming in, because there's some pretty big rips going on. And retail is still quite bullish out there. Triple M's been a big winner. That to me is suggesting there's not a lot wrong with the economy overall. Well, the market doesn't think so either. Anyway, Amazon. Ooh. Meta's the one here. Like, great trend line for Meta. I think that'll come up and recover that vector. Airbnb, potentially another little bit of downside into these moving averages, but it's not a bad level for a bounce on Airbnb. And its earnings are still really good. Like, it's smashing the earnings levels. It's probably one of the, even at this level here, it was better down there, but even at this level here, I still think it's one of the better companies out there in terms of profits and cash position and stuff. They seem to be fairly well managed financially. AVGO. I'm not seeing a world in which these guys get back up to their all-time highs, but like anytime soon anyway. But for the time being, there's certainly we're in a reasonable level for a bounce. But wow, that's looking negative. Even TSM, obviously, 50% recovery of that vector candle would see it back into a pretty highly traded zone, into the 140. That seems like a crazy move, but I would say that's probably going to happen this year at some stage. 38%. That's not too bad. Stellantis and Ford got a bit of a buy, but still not breaking any key levels to the upside. ASX got a big buy off the 200 EMA, which it has found support off quite a bit. So that's going to be a key level to hold. Again, bounces up into 84.70 is probably on the cards here, but if we're seeing lower highs being put in, then it's looking like a potentially a good topping pattern. This is an interesting one. So Ethereum versus BTC is still, these guys are still longing the shit out of Ethereum versus BTC. And it's just flat. And the funny thing is, Ethereum didn't get mentioned in that Trump tweet. So, I mean, this is at key levels. It hasn't been this low for ages. January 2021, that was a pretty good time for Ethereum. That was actually pretty close to when Ethereum started to run. That was when Bitcoin was getting to the first little peak in its bull run. And then we saw, obviously, a pullback in Bitcoin, which is, I would say, has already happened. But then, yeah, Ethereum did run pretty hard after that. I just don't know that it's going to be the one. There's no guarantee that it has to, but these guys seem to think it does. So, whatevs. Lots of people longing Ethereum as well at the moment. Shorts have dropped off considerably. BTC longs, so these guys are still going hard on it. Almost back up to levels that we were like right through the bottom. Like before the last pump, we've actually, geez, I didn't notice that. Just how high we've gotten. That's surprising, actually. Well, there's certainly a lot of buy the dippers coming in anyway, which is a good thing. Like they're still buying on this pump as well. It does make me a little nervous that we're already getting close to the top here, but not a bad thing. One thing I did notice this morning, which I hadn't picked up, was BTC shorts. It got to a level that we haven't seen again since October 2023. And that was just before we had the breakout and a pretty big move up from a reasonably low level. Like Bitcoin was at 30K or something. So obviously that's dropped off pretty hard now. A lot of those shorts got wiped out, but that's typically what happens when the shorts get up to those sort of levels. It's actually a good time for a bounce. Same thing sort of happened in here during this chop. Like people were shorting the hell out of it, and then it bounced, wiped them out. Shorting the hell out of it here, and it dropped. They started to take profit, but actually they were still shorting. Shorts were still increasing at the bottom here, and it pumped and wiped them out, and it dropped again. Same sort of deal. People start shorting the hell out of it, and you can tell here the shorters were starting to get more and more tired, and they came back in again pretty hard when Bitcoin got, that was the wick down, where it wicked pretty close to this level here, similar to what we've just done. And then pumped and moved to a new all-time high. But don't take that as a guarantee that we're actually going to pump to a new all-time high here. Based on what I'm seeing, it's certainly possible. It's not a guarantee though. So just looking at Ethereum, it's had a good day, but got a pretty decent resistance level that's just hit too, so be aware of that. Ethereum's got so much resistance to get through. If we go to a new all-time high on Bitcoin, then yeah, Ethereum should at least break 4K, but I honestly don't know that it's got that in it. We barely did we even we barely made a new all-time high on Ethereum this cycle so far. So CME is going to have a pretty decent gap on it. Like we've actually come up and closed this gap on let's just say on BTC. So this will open in a couple of hours. That's going to be a gigantic gap. It's going to be bigger than this one here. We are currently pulling back on BTC still, so I don't know that it will close that immediately. In fact, I don't really expect it to, but we will probably be sitting pretty close to a resistance level here too. Like that's on the 1 hour there, that particular resistance. Could argue that it's actually up in that sort of area, which will be pretty close to current price action. So just be a little wary of that. There are a lot of vector candles left behind at the moment. 3 big vector candles. Generally, you don't want to be longing at the end of that. That's normally the end of a run. At least pullbacks at the end of that. Not necessarily the end of a run. It's quite often actually could be the start of a decent run. But you can see here, this is a reasonable example of it. So sideways for ages, but yeah, generally don't go too much higher after 3 1 hour vectors. Same with to the downside. 3 is not a bad number unless you have a flush like that. Again, 3 vectors to the upside, and it basically had a pullback. Granted, one of them was a stopping volume candle, but again, 3 vectors to the upside, kind of sideways and down a little bit. You know, 3 vectors still push a little bit higher than you'd think, so just beware of that. But generally retrace back into the middle of those vectors. Okay, that's same thing here. Big run up, 3 vectors, pull back. It actually pulled back quite hard. So coming off a low can be the same sort of deal. You don't necessarily have to pull back too far though. If this is going to be a big run up, you could get something like that. Now that was the breakout of that gigantic range that we were in. But typically, as I said, like you don't, on big breakouts to the upside, it's actually reasonably rare that you would get 3 candles without like 3 vectors, green vectors in a row without some sort of pullback. 3 there again, pullback. Just in the shorter term anyway. All right. So beware of that. Don't be a dickhead and short the pullbacks like me. Just look at it for buying opportunities at this stage. The thing that concerns me though is just, I'm not hitting there. I thought I was hitting control. There we go. Things that concerns me is we're at the value area low here. So we really need to break through that to actually get continuation, but you got point of controls pretty close as well. I think 98 is a pretty good level for it to actually turn around from. There were some quite a lot of vectors around there too, so potentially even 99,500. Yeah, not bad levels, but at the moment, not a bad setup for a decent run to the upside. It's just we are getting a little overheated now. Yeah, I went to sleep like right there. Anyway, as I said, this is the key one for me. So we could run a little bit higher on total versus stables, but and look, the pullback doesn't have to be into that level. I just think it is a good level for a pullback. The other thing, Litecoin hasn't actually really sort of broken that level it was at previously. Litecoin wasn't mentioned in the tweet either. Sol was though, so good move on Sol here. I actually expect Sol to probably hit at least into the value area low. Again, if the market goes on a run, then lots of targets above that. 220 would be a pretty decent one on Sol, I think. But let's move over to this one. So smart money's pulled back a little bit on Friday. Generally, you would see that after a bit of a bounce. Dumb money's still pulling back, so that's probably a good sign for the bulls. Yeah, it's kind of a coin flip there at the moment. I suspect smart money should still keep buying. If this is a proper run, smart money will still buy on the rip. Okay, so this here was a pretty major bottom. Sorry, what I'm trying to get at is these sort of little pumps that you get before you move down again. Smart money generally stays pretty flat and will still buy in pretty quickly. Just you do see little dips on the rips, that's all. But is this a little dip or is that the top for smart money? Hard to say. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting week. I can tell you that it's probably going to be a bit choppy. But generally, bias is to the upside at the moment. No massive buys on IBIT yet either. That's still a little bit concerning for me. We had so much volume coming through up here. This is only half of it. Just because most of it was in January that they were selling. Some decent ones, but nothing huge. Like, and that's the thing that concerns me. We've had such a quick rip to the upside without the volume coming through from the big guys. So these guys are expecting to get a better price in the future. Just be aware of that. Yes, the news can pump it, but the news, any sort of news, can also just rip it to the downside if the big guys aren't supporting the move. So a little bit concerned about this one. Be interesting to see what happens on the open. If there's a decent dark pool trade that leads to upside on the open, then fair enough. But there's going to be a big gap on CME, and that's probably one to watch out for. Everyone's going to be pointing it out too, though. So, yeah, was some decent buying through here, I think. Bit of accumulation, but like to see a big trade come in after a flush. That's all. This market trades on different time frames to what most retail will trade on. Coinbase is holding, and that was another reason I suggested that I thought we're getting close to the bottom because Coinbase hadn't flushed yet. So expect a bit of a bounce on this as well. We had some decent trades come through on the 2x long. Didn't really drop too much below that. So kind of expect it to come back up into here, to be honest. Should be a decent pump. Marathon Digital never really dropped too much. So XLP, consumer staples, is still going up. So the market is still moving towards defensives. And that's something to be a little bit concerned about in the longer term. As we said, the money is shifting across different areas of the market at the moment. Interesting to see whether consumer discretionary would buys or sells. Sweep there and a couple of decent trades at the high at the end of the day. Could be a little fake out side, but I haven't got confirmation of momentum shift yet on the daily for most of these. So just be aware of that, but in general, decent buying around the lows here by the look of it. We don't know if they're buys or sells, but it looks like a potential buy. This looks more like a sell though. So utilities is actually sort of grinding to the downside, which normally this is a defensive sector. Healthcare defensive sector, and this is what I was talking about earlier. Healthcare's actually got another decent trade right at the high here. So it could be shifting out of defensives a little bit. Maybe back into risk for a little pump. They're not huge trades though. Nothing massive around the lows after this little downside move. So again, it's probably just an opportunity for Wall Street to sell into retail. So still expecting a lower high. Metals and mining still struggling as well. Right. Excuse me. Yeah, looks like it wants to make the CME gap a bit bigger at the moment. Some decent shorts coming in up here, so it's potentially going to take them out before dropping. But man, looking at the ones that came through down the bottom here, that's going to be a target. And look, this run up, there were some massive shorts that came through. They disappeared off this chart because it only looks at, I think, the daily or something. But they were there from previous drops. Lots of volume coming through there too. That's just a news play, and interesting to see how the market digests that. CBD's actually dropped off. That's weird. CBD's not going as hard as I thought it would through this. Looks a bit better on CoinGlass. Still people funding rates are slowly starting to turn green again. That's quite a lot of red actually on the funding rates. Don't often see that much. Anyway, this one's more the one, the bid-ask delta at the moment. There's a lot of red coming through on the bid-ask delta. That concerns me a little bit as well. Now, the other thing too is that Bybit got exactly what it wanted. It got a massive flush on Bitcoin and Ethereum. They would have been buying the crap out of Ethereum at the bottom here. So they want to pump the charts as well at the moment. And Trump's done them a favor. And yeah, it'll just be it's just a matter of whether or not it can continue. Yes. So just beware. I mean, first trading day in March is normally green as well, like 78 or 68% of the time or something. So that's something to be aware of. Fridays is normally red and Mondays is normally red this year, and it bucked the trend on Friday, so we could buck the trend on Monday as well. But just yeah, be aware that bid-ask delta is quite red at the moment. This is a 48-hour. There's not a lot coming in above. There's this little bit here is probably what it's going for at the moment, 94,700-ish. When I was looking at this on the 1 week, yeah, I was looking at this before I went to bed and thinking, oh, I'm protected up into, I think it was up into here. Like, if they take all that in the freaking 6 hours, 7 hours that I'm asleep, I'd be pretty surprised. And the bucket, so good on. That's why I just gambling account, basically. Yeah, scratch the itch. So there is still some pretty decent liquidity just from the last week up into the 96.5 level. That wouldn't be unheard of to have a little mini pullback, another run up, and then a bigger pullback. But at the moment, it's not leaving. Well, I guess it's leaving a decent amount behind, down into that 91 level. Potentially 91.1. Don't know that it would pick up the rest of this, but yeah, have to wait and see. So that's a fairly strong level. 160 million of liquidations. That's pretty decent. And yeah, just got this one here, 95, 160, up into the 96. So these ones are just ones that have come in the last couple of hours, but it looks like it kind of at least wants to go to that 94, 500, if not a little higher. We'll see. There's not a lot of volume here to come back in, so it's kind of suggesting there might be more upside to come. I'm talking back into the 98, that value area high kind of level. All right. Yeah, which should see the rest of them move pretty well as well. Big move on some of these, 30% on XP on the day. Algorand, Render. And the other thing was you saw across Twitter and YouTube and stuff, everyone was sounding bearish. And this will bring them all out saying we're going super bullish. We could do. Just concerns me when that happens. Sharp AI just not. Yeah, AI 16Z. Yeah. Interesting levels on some of these. Gaming got a little pump as well. like everyone's just gone, rightio, the bull market's back on. Let's pump it. ADA, fucking hell. 50%, 56% move on ADA. Oh man, that scares me. That's such a quick move. Oh Jesus. Hard to go against the trend, but far out. That's a big move. I mean, it's not unheard of for these things to do 100% in a day, but could be the what is it? Altcoin season finally. I'm just going to be watching Stonks pretty closely. I did have a nibble back in on my super account into the Aussie ETF, Bitcoin ETF last week. Didn't go in as hard as I did the first time, but yeah, need to see signs of turnarounds at key levels on Bitcoin to really suggest that this is a fake out. So yeah, I think yeah, hit a good level here. A little bit of a pullback is expected. Just doesn't necessarily have to be a big one. I think there's enough support out of these two levels here on the 1 hour on Bitcoin to potentially get another bounce up into that value area high. Sorry, point of control or value. Excuse me, or value area high. The value area high is probably a better one, probably even just above that into the 99. Seems like a pretty good level. Yeah, this one's going to be the one that I'm watching. Yeah, bugger me if I didn't think we were going to be like this is such a critical trend line. It concerns me that we didn't actually retest this. We did retest this sort of horizontal level here. But yeah, that seems concerning, but we'll wait and see. There's one more thing I was going to go through. Oh, I was going to have a look at the advanced decline line. So advanced decline line on S&P 500. That's in the hourly. Let's do daily. Obviously, we did make a higher high there. It's actually back above those moving averages, and the moving averages hasn't crossed yet. So that's actually a pretty bullish sign for S&P 500. Hard to be bearish with that looking like that. Not a great indication on the smart money index though, the smart money indicator. The other thing is, let's have a look at hash ribbons. So hash ribbons hasn't printed a buy signal yet. I suspect it might soon though. Typically when it does give a buy signal, then that would be the lowest. You wouldn't expect it to break back below this level. It's not a 100% indicator though, so just be with that. Particularly if you're in an uptrend, you wouldn't expect to come back down below that level. All right. I think that's about it. It's been long enough, but for the start of the week, it's looking like a pretty decent week potentially. Potentially 2 weeks. As I said, March the 10th is going to be very interesting for me, because that would make it almost exactly to the same week or number of weeks, cycle low to cycle high. On Bitcoin. Okay. Catch you later. Have a good week.